What should you expect from the Seattle ground game on Sunday? Is there a new number one wide receiver for Daniel Jones? And should Jonathan Taylor and or Lamar Jackson actually be on your bench in week number 9? Plus, Bill Wanke, an owner of Top-10 teams in both the FFPC main event and the Football Guys Players Championship, drops in on the show to talk about Anthony Miller, managing fab budgets, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
I can't stand the pressure. I've seen greater men than need a lesson. Make out of the lesson. Take the head for a red just 'cause it was right there in the dresser so easy. Pick me up, kiss me, and you squeeze me.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now listening to the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com, with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here's Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you to the Quiet Hollers. Remember to check out their music at quiethollers.com. Greetings and salutations, all you Balkaholics and Farrelliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com. I am, of course, your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman, and my co-host is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Farrell, welcome into the show, man. How you doing tonight?
Oh, Balky, I'm doing great. It has been a long week, but a good football week, packed with a lot of info and a lot of happenings, and I miss talking to you, so I'm glad to be back here with you on Friday night.
I'm excited because, well, not only did my Green Bay Packers come away with, it's hard to celebrate a victory when you're going up against the JV squad on Thursday night, but I'm still celebrating it nonetheless. I'm excited to see Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and what they were doing, and excited to see the return of Aaron Jones, too. So not only were Packers fans excited to see that, Aaron Jones owners definitely excited to see that as well. I don't want to brag. This is not something I like to do on the show, but I'm going to brag tonight. So I got off to you actually alluded to this a few weeks ago. I got off to a slow start in Kentucky, which is in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, KFFSC.com, which Farrell is the commissioner of. I got off to a slow start there. I looked at my teams last week, and I'm in like 3 private leagues, and I'm going to lump those in as well when I talk about this. But last week, Farrell, I'm in 21 leagues. Last week, 17-4. This past week, 15-6. I am white hot right now. White hot.
Buggy, and you deserve it, and you prepared for it. This is the time of the year to get hot, so you got a lot of green and few red scores on that scoreboard. I'm happy for you, brother. How have you been doing it?
I don't know exactly. Well, and we'll talk with Bill Wanke a little bit about this, but I think
Bill.
One of the things I've always prided myself on when it comes to fantasy football is I feel like I always build deep teams. I feel like I go my team is always deeper than the majority of the teams in my league that I play against. So once the bye week gauntlet hits, I feel like I'm well prepared. And I think the last 2 weeks have been pretty evident of that. I've been scrambling just like everybody else. Everybody's dealing with COVID. Everybody's dealing with injuries. Everybody's dealing with bye weeks. But I feel like the teams that are a little bit more prepared this year, more than ever, are getting a bigger boost. And I think that's what's happening. Now, that said, Farrell, this week I'll probably end up going, like 2-19 or something like that or whatever. But we'll see what happens. I'm excited. I'm off to a good start. I got a lot of Rodgers and a lot of Devontae Adams teams. Go ahead.
You will not do that because you didn't brag about it after the first week. You waited a week and settled in. You got 2 weeks in a row, and I don't call yourself bragging now. You're just stating the facts. Unlike the injury report this week from the Green Bay Packers, we could use a little bit more legitimate injury report for those running backs. as we get ready for the Thursday night game.
I never understood that too, because I got this local fantasy show that I do in Northeast Wisconsin, and we're getting the injury report. Well, we're not getting the injury report, but I have to give real-time advice on Aaron Jones. And this news is breaking from Mike Garafolo and from Ian Rappaport that Aaron Jones is expected to be active, but may not, he might have his snaps limited or whatever. So I told everybody, and I lived my own advice. I didn't start Aaron Jones in any of my leagues on Thursday night because I was worried about the role that he would play. And then sure enough, the Packers, who are super cautious about injuries, activate Aaron Jones and then let him touch the ball on the first 4 plays from scrimmage, and then let Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, and Aaron Rodgers play into the fourth quarter in a game they're up by 24. It was driving me nuts watching that on Thursday. I didn't understand it, Farrell.
It was like the old Ford LTD. It was limited to how many they could sell. And that's exactly what Jones was. He was just limited into whatever you could call. And it was nonsensical for him to be on the field, especially when the kid Urban, the San Jose State product, has been hanging around in the league for a while, finally got a chance and looked good catching the ball, looked good running the ball. I would have further developed that player's skills a little bit late into that game. They finally pulled Rodgers and they pulled some guys. I would have liked to let them. I would like to see them let our old pal from down here in Kentucky, Tim Boyle, throw the ball once, but that didn't happen. But congratulations, your Packers, a big, big game, Wanke.
Yeah, it was good, and they're entering into a soft part of the schedule. We'll see if they can make up some points. And anybody who owns Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, and perhaps Aaron Jones and Alan Lazard coming up too, I would think they're going to be happy with the results going forward. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to talk about the Broncos that you need to start or bench this weekend. Who's the Dolphins rusher, the running back, to play in Week 9, and a team manager of a pair of top 10 teams in both the FFPC main event and the Football Guys Players Championship. Bill Wanke is going to join Farrell and I to talk about his interesting approach to season-long fantasy football that is paying off big time in 2020. Give a shout-out to the chat room right now. Feel free to post any questions you might have in there. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, the show is at HSFF Hour. I am at Eric Balkman. Farrell is at J. Farrell Elliott. Bill Wanke is at Bill Wanke. That's BILLWANKE. You can post on our Facebook page at facebook.com/HSFF Hour. And if you want to give us a call, we always welcome phone calls. 347-426-82. That's 347-GAME-OBA. You can also email the show at the inbox, highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. We get a bunch of emails we're going to get to throughout the program tonight. If you have any last-minute questions, please send those in to us right now. We'll try to get to all those questions, tweets, and emails in the fantasy feedback segment later in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend, Bryce, and, of course, our producer and mutual friend, Rob. One other thing I want to point out before we get going on the news tonight, Stephen Ranigan on the High Stakes Lowdown this week, rotoviz.com/podcast. Got a chance to catch up with him. He's got an FFPC main event contending team. And remember, Stephen Ranigan, winner of the Fantasy Championship through My Fantasy League and RT Sports, already won a 6-figure grand prize there, already won the NFFC Cutline Championship last year, another 6-figure grand prize. And by the way, 4th place in the FFPC World Famous Playoff Challenge last year. He might have had 3 6-figure prizes under his belt. As of right now, he's got 2, shooting for a 3rd one right now. Stephen Ranigan's a good guy because you don't really know a whole lot about him, but he's had a lot of success. And I think he brings you underneath the covers, behind the curtains, as the kids say, in this podcast that we did with RotoViz. That is available, rotoviz.com/podcast, as well as anywhere you get podcasts to further that point as well. Stephen Ranigan, good guy, great podcast. Thanks to Football Guys, Draft Sharks, Roto World, and, of course, Rob for tonight's Fantasy Flash. Let's talk about the Niners side of things last night, Farrell. We talked about Packers.
Before we do, I've got an email coming in. This is our first in-show email that I've ever had. This is fabulous. From Javier in Fort Wayne. This is excellent. He wants to know if you will introduce our guest tonight in your best imitation. I wonder if Bill knows you do these great imitations. Your best imitation of a Chris Farley voice. He wants to know if you can
Chris Farley. You know what's funny about okay, so here's what's funny about Chris Farley and me. Number one, I've never really done a Chris Farley impression before. But I will say this. Chris Farley, like myself, is a Wisconsin guy. Everybody thinks he's from Chicago. He's not from Chicago.
Nope.
He's actually was born and raised in Wisconsin, went to the Second City, I think it was Second City, and then got taken off there from Lorne Michaels in Saturday Night Live. Here's what Chris Farley and I share in common, Farrell. When I was in high school, my senior year, I was a starting cornerback on my high school football team. We played Chris Farley's high school, and Farley was a little bit older than me, but we played Chris Farley's high school in football, and I was like our number one. I wasn't a shutdown corner, but I was the number one corner on our team, and I was tasked with guarding this receiver from it was Madison Edgewood High School in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was tasked with guarding him for the duration of the game. We ended up losing that game. It was like 48-35, something like that. And the dude I was guarding ended up he got one touchdown on me. I know that. I think he caught like 5 or 6 balls for probably about 60 or 70 yards in a touchdown. So I did okay against him. That guy his name was David Braun. He went on to play football D1 with the Wisconsin Badgers. So I felt like that was a win. But that is my connection to Chris Farley.
Well, that's a good connection to Chris Farley. And, you've got a lot of talent, Sparky. It just goes to show you won't do a Chris Farley invitation. It's hard to be a hero in your own backyard. Chris Farley known world over, and you haven't perfected an invitation. But I digress. Javier in Fort Wayne will just have to be disappointed if you don't give it a try. But isn't that a great name? I just, Bill Wanke. Isn't that a great name? I love it.
Fantastic name. And I will do my best. I will do my best at a Chris Farley impersonation when we bring on Bill Wanke onto the show in about 4 minutes here or so, just to appease Javier, who's a longtime listener of the show. So last night, we don't need to talk about, hey, you need to play Aaron Rodgers, you need to play Devontae Adams. Let's talk about the Niners side of things. Farrell, Richie James came out of nowhere. 9 catches, 184 yards, and a touchdown. He was on injured reserve a little less than 3 weeks ago, had no catches, and less than 300 career yards in the NFL. Now, granted, Jair Alexander got hurt. Kevin King was already inactive, but he went off and obviously caught the touchdown as well. I'm curious, when you look forward in FFPC drafts at this guy over the next couple of weeks, he's got New Orleans in Week 10. Is this a guy that you would spend any money on in Fab and potentially start if you're in dire straits with bye weeks and injuries next week? Or is this simply just one game, just ignore it and move on?
Well, sure you should. You should never ignore a performance like this. Now, you said Green Bay is coming up against a soft schedule. It'll be needed. Perhaps they can find a defense. But this is a good player. And, I've got a little advantage over geographically, with this player. He's a former Raider, not the silver and black kind. He's a Middle Tennessee State University Blue Raider. We know Richie really well, and he might be the Santa Clara surprise, but Balky, he was no surprise to us. What he really does well is a good route runner, and he got between your linebackers and your secondary, and he finds the open spaces. He's a good top-end speed guy. That's the same kind of speed you saw from Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice was slow, but when he finally got to his top speed, he stayed fast and got a little faster. That's the same thing this guy does. Good hands. He had his opportunity to play. He'll get in some sweeps. He'll do some things once this team returns to more established names at the receiver position. But honestly, Balky, I don't know when they're going to do that. And it looks like Mullins are going to go forward at quarterback with Mullins, and Mullins looks across the huddle. He's familiar with this guy because this guy he's been working with for 2 years. So I think we're going to see more out of this player.
News coming over the waiver wire, the NFL wire about 6 hours ago, roughly. Chris Carson is not going to play against the Bills this week. Neither will Carlos Hyde. So it is DJ Dallas, it is Travis Homer in that Seattle backfield. And Farrell, I'm curious, last week there were 63 offensive snaps for the Seattle Seahawks. DJ Dallas was in on 56 of them. Travis Homer only in 7. So I'm kind of curious. I know Travis Homer had the knee injury last week, and he was probably limited because of that. But DJ Dallas, you got to find a way to start him in any leagues that you own him in, given what he did last week without Hyde and without Carson active?
Oh, Bucky, I don't know. This is the same coach that 4.5 years ago in the Super Bowl didn't give the ball to Marshawn Lynch at the 1-yard line. So I don't know what he's going to do with his running backs. Stillwater's run deep, Bucky, with me. But yeah, he's got Alex Collins, the Irish dancing machine on speed dial too. So anything could happen in this backfield. So I really can't say. Yes, there's some teams on bye this week. There's naturally plenty of injuries happening. If you have some, I had a Jermichael Hasty deliver me 3.3 points last night. So, desperate times make desperate actions. I hope DJ Dallas is a player. I hope anyone is a player. If his name isn't Chris Carson, Carson ruled out, I'd like to line up against a team that is employing the Seahawks backfield.
Bill Wanke, the owner of a pair of top 10 teams in the FFPC main event and Football Guys Players Championship, just around the corner here. One other point I want to make before we get to Bill. J.K. Dobbins, Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator for the Ravens today, announced that J.K. Dobbins' role is going to, quote, evolve as the season goes on. Now, if you remember, J.K. Dobbins last week, sans Mark Ingram, had his first 100-yard rushing game of his career. And maybe if his role evolves into something a little bit more consistent, this dude could be a difference maker. Everybody talked about Jonathan Taylor potentially being a league winner this year. That role might go to J.K. Dobbins as far as the rookie running backs go. Farrell, as long as Mark Ingram is out, J.K. Dobbins is only going to increase his stranglehold on that backfield with Gus Edwards. And I feel like Dobbins is the type of guy that when it comes down to him or a receiver or a tight end, when you're trying to figure out who to flex out, Dobbins is the type of guy that you will break ties in favor of and get his upside in the lineup. How would you handle your Dobbins teams right now?
I think so. You paid a dear price for Dobbins, so you're happy to hear what Greg Roman is saying. Now, I've known Greg a long time. John Carroll College, educated by the Jesuits. This is just how they talk. As the season, what was that quote, Bucky? As the season moves along, whatever he said. He's always
his role is
he's
going to
typical
evolve as the season goes on.
Evolve,
yeah.
Yes. Greg's operation is always evolving. We'll see. There's just so much talent in that backfield with Ingram ruled out. You might get a little bit more than you're counting on this weekend, but hey, you're going up against a team. I don't know if it's going to start this weekend. If you're going to push that 79, 80 yards a game that the Colts are giving up to rushing and to running backs, your best shot is to do it through Lamar Jackson this weekend. So I think you're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that Greg Roman evolution. But boy, that's a hell of an education you get at John Carroll. There's a lot of John Carroll guys in the NFL, by the way. You wouldn't expect it
really?
in such a small school. Oh yeah, they're all over. A lot of front office guys, a lot of coaching guys. Tom Telesco with the Chargers, and Nick Caserio with New England. It goes on and on.
There's actually a I shouldn't even be saying this, but I'm going to. There is I already. People know I live in northeast Wisconsin, and when you go to the establishments in the watering holes up in northeast Wisconsin, and you need to, when nature calls, you go to the urinals in these establishments. There's usually advertisements above these urinals, and there is a John Miller Carroll law office that specializes in DUIs and everything like that, and they advertise right above the urinals in these bars. So when you say John Carroll, that's immediately what I think of when I see. When I think about I was just watching the Packers game last night. I saw it at the establishment I was at there. So John Carroll holds a special place. Not that I've ever had to use them. Hopefully I never will. But John Carroll holds a special place as far as northeast Wisconsin goes.
It has a little Saul Goodman feel to it, So that's
yes, it does. Yes, indeed. Saul Goodman / Bob Odenkirk on the Better Call Social. It is a fantastic show. Hope everybody's watching it. And I want to bring in tonight's guest on that note, ladies and gentlemen. This is his second season playing season-long fantasy football after playing DFS for 6 years. He joined the FFPC after hearing Evan Silva and Adam Leviton talk about it on the Establish the Run podcast and watching one of their live stream drafts. Last season, he played in a handful of FFPC Football Guys leagues, put a couple of groups together to enter the main event as well. Had fun, limited success, learned a bunch, and decided to run it back bigger this season, crushing it in satellites, crushing it in the Terminator, and you can't get much bigger than also having a top 10 team in both the FFPC main event and the Football Guys Players Championship. Here's where my Chris Farley impression comes in right now. He is not divorced thrice. He does not live in a van down by the river. He's here to discuss his fantasy teams and more. Please welcome on the show, my apologies, Bill Wanke. Bill, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, guys. Thanks for inviting me. Can you guys hear me okay?
Have you on, dude. Yes, you're coming in through awesome, perfectly. Yeah. This is good stuff. Bill,
good. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
We want to get into obviously the fantasy football portion, because I think anybody who is, in his second year of playing season long and to have a top 10 team in both the FPC and the FFPC main event, everybody wants us to pick your brain, which we're going to do. You are retired. And I want you to tell the listeners what you did for a living prior to your retirement before we get into fantasy football.
Yeah, sure. So I was an executive at a software professional services company for about 35 years, got to work with a lot of really smart and talented people. We were in telecommunications, so it kind of helped put together the efficient and robust network we've got today. By training, I'm a computer science and applied math guy. And now that I'm retired, I indulge my hobbies. So I get to coach some ice hockey, I play guitar, I got a temporary gig in a bar band, I play poker, and now I'm playing fantasy football.
Poker, hockey,
you are
fantasy
living the
football.
Life, Bill. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much living the dream, I have to admit. You're right.
I never, I dabble in, hockey is the one thing I've never, hockey is not big in Northeast Wisconsin. I mean, there's some people who get into it, but here it's all about, basketball and football for sure. But Farrell, a guitar player, I know you're a fan of that.
Oh yeah, and playing in a bar band is just a huge. That's just a huge gift, because is it a weekly gig, Bill?
So it was for a while. COVID has kind of put an end to that.
Yeah.
But yes, it was for a while. It was great. I got to play with a great bunch of guys, and they tolerated my not so great play, so it was pretty good.
And people come out to see you, and you develop this relationship with the regulars. Having a standing gig and a night in a venue is why you pick up a guitar in the first place. So good for you, brother. Now, repeat that math background that you have real quickly for me.
Oh yeah, so I'm I studied computer science and applied math.
Applied math. This is the first competitor that Balky that all of them have impressed me. This is the first one that would leave me trembling in my boots. Applied mathematics. This just gets worse every year, I tell you, with this competition. But yeah, good job. Well, Balky teased the fact to us earlier that you have a unique approach with how you go about your season-long fantasy football. So tell us a little bit about that. I think everybody that we've had on the show has had their own unique approach, but Balky's expressly talked about it tonight. So you must have something going on. Obviously, you're unique in the fact you're leading in the top 10, at least, in both contests, and that's a great honor. Big congratulations. What's Balky talking about the uniqueness of your approach?
Yeah, so if it's unique, it's probably because I came to it as like a guy who thinks about games as opposed to a football guy. So probably disappointing to the people listening is I really don't know much about the game of real life football. So if you guys wanted to ask me about like the difference between cover 2 and cover 0, I couldn't help you. Like if you want to know the root trees of like an X receiver versus a Z receiver, I can't help you with that either. So to me, I kind of came to this as it's a game, and I tried to understand what the game is about. And, try to model it. Like you look at the map and there's an inherent model for the game. And then since it's a multi-person game, there's going to be game theory aspects that apply to the game. And so I kind of concern myself with those things. So for me, a lot of what I'm worrying about is projections, and then the underlying components of those projections, things that are generating on utilization, like what kind of snaps are guys getting, routes they're running, target shares, air yards, that kind of stuff you've heard about. Like I'm really focused on that kind of stuff, and then what the trends are in that. I don't really, think about much about, is Darrell Henderson a better back than Malcolm Brown, and like why isn't he getting more touches? So I'm never going to be on the hashtag free Aaron Jones thread. Like I don't know those things. I don't think about them, and so I'm really just worrying about what do the projections look like, and do I have quality projections, and how can those help me?
How much football do you watch on Sunday? I'm a red zone guy. So, I turn on the red zone and I am there all day. I don't leave it. I love watching it. It's not that I'm not a fan of football, but I'm more kind of like I enjoy the spectacle of it. And I've never really got into, I played a couple of years of Pop Warner in elementary school, and I was a good athlete, so I could play wide receiver and cover corner in a touch game, but that's about it. Gotcha.
So, Bill, this is what I wanted to, I sort of want to center this on, and this is what I really want to drive home to our listeners. A lot of times, myself included, I'm totally guilty of this. A lot of times people maybe overrate talent, and they see, you brought up Aaron Jones, which is the example I'm going to use. People look at the Green Bay Packers backfield, and they're like, Aaron Jones is clearly the most talented guy there. Why are they not giving him the ball more? Why are they not letting him make plays when the guys behind him, Jamal Williams, A.J. Dillon, whatever, are not proven playmakers, And so for you kind of eliminate that whole aspect of it. You don't look at what guys could be, assuming rational coaching. You don't look at what guys could be putting up, their production, what it could be. You look at what teams are actually doing, what these players are actually, how they're actually performing on the field, and the numbers they're actually putting up. That is your center sort of, in my opinion, that's what your center difference is really in between how you treat season-long fantasy football and how a lot of other people do it, right?
Yeah, Bulky, that's exactly spot on, right? I don't try to think about like what coaches should be doing. I'm really just more focused about what they are doing. Like I am interested if they might change what they're going to do, and and if they do change it, what the implications of that would be. But like kind of wishing and hoping that like somehow Aaron Jones is going to start getting like Zeke-like or CMC-like touch counts. It's like it's not going to happen. And so if you drafted him in the early second round, hoping that this was going to be the year that they freed Aaron Jones, you made a mistake. If you took him in the late second, thinking that what you were going to get was a 60% back with really efficient and a high value offense, then you made a fine choice.
Bill, this is you. Go ahead, Farrell.
Well, no, Bucky, finish up your thought because I like where you're going with that, so stay with it.
Well, what I wanted to ask you, Bill, because we haven't had this a whole lot in recent years, but this year it seems like we've had a bunch of people who don't have a ton of experience at the high-stakes FFPC level, and then they come in and they're wrecking stuff. And I think Bill is one of those guys who's doing that. This is your second year playing season-long fantasy football with the FFPC. You said you learned some pretty important things in your first year last year. What were some of the most significant things that you think have helped buoy you to success in year two?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So as I went through the year last year, I found myself faced with a lot of decisions that I didn't know the answer to. But more importantly than that, I didn't even have a framework for figuring out the answer. And for an analytics guy, that's kind of disconcerting, right? It's one thing not to know, that's fine. You can go, get a process and go figure it out. I didn't even know how to approach it. And so I kind of spent last season stockpiling those questions and trying to figure out, like, here's the things I don't even conceptually understand. And then after the season was over, then I looked and tried to figure out, like, answers to those things. And it was really, most of them fell into the two categories. The first was roster construction. Like, I didn't even understand the basics. You know, like how many skill position players do I want at each position? Like, is that a static type thing, or is it dynamic based on the skill level I have and the kind of the draft I used or the guys I picked up on the wire? You know, should I be worried about correlation? Like, do I want it or I don't? Like, do I want volatility or I don't? Like, so there were like lots and lots of questions about that I didn't know the answers to. And I spent off season trying to go find them, and God bless, there were a lot of really smart guys who did a lot of really good analytics work, and the answers for a lot of them were out there. And so I was just, you know, I didn't need to invent the wheel here. It's like I went out there and found that the wheel was there and just started grabbing it. And then for the ones that people didn't answer, they left like good thoughts about how maybe to think about the problem. And so I spent my time doing that. So showing up this year at draft season, I was like much better prepared about what I wanted out of my rosters, how to construct them, how to deal with the fact that, you know, there are 11 other guys trying to figure out their roster and how to adapt to that. So a big chunk was roster construction of what I learned.
That's a great.
And Farrell, I know you want to ask the next question about the Bears, but the great thing about not inventing the wheel, when you discover the wheel, that wheel always has spokes that you can grab onto and sort of move with the flow of information, which is clearly what Bill did here, with, you know, in his second year of fantasy football with the FFPC.
God, that was beautiful. You know, I had an illustrator in my mind the whole time you were saying that. That was beautiful. Good job.
Thank you so much.
I'm feeling a little full of myself with this question, Bill, because you and I did the same thing this past week. We went out, we picked out off the free agent wire, wide receiver, Chicago Bears, Darnell Mooney. Now, I know why I picked him, and I'm going to tell you exactly why I picked him. I watched him in college. I thought he was a good draft pick. Being in the fifth round, I thought the Bears really got on a bargain. I thought they should put him on the field quicker than he actually did. We just talked about before you joined us, Richie James, a guy with high top end speed. This guy, Darnell, is significantly faster and ran it at the combine. A great kid out of Tulane. These are the reasons that I thought he would be successful in the NFL, and we need that kind of player in Chicago. That is not gonna that's not gonna get all down in the mouth when the ball doesn't get directed to him or is an uncatchable pass from one of the two quarterbacks. So that's the reason that I put him on my roster. No mathematics involved at all. Now, please tell me why you picked this player to put on your roster.
Sure. And, you know, and I think the good thing, Farrell, is like when you talk about your way to find them and I talk about my way to find them, it's going to tell people that, like, hey, look, there are multiple ways to play the game.
There are multiple ways to play the game, Bill, but you're the only one that has two teams in the top 10. One with the league with a league of 2,500 plus players, and one with a league of 10,000 plus players. And you know, you were talking about correlation, and I was writing down the name correlation. I thought I missed another player or something. I didn't know. You know, I'm trying to keep up here. So go ahead, Bill.
So
what were you thinking?
So here's how I found Darnell, right? So did well at the combine, right? He's above athletically, right? So if you go out to 3 Sigma, you'll see that he's like a good half standard deviation better than your average NFL receiver. He's got like he's got like 4.3 40 speed. But more importantly to me was he found his way onto the field as a rookie in a year when there were no OTAs, there were no preseason games, and yet somehow he was on the field. And he wasn't just doing cardio, he was getting targets, right? So here was a guy the coaches were clearly like taking a shining to, like they liked the guy, they put him on the field, they were giving him action, and then every week he was getting more snaps, he was running more routes, he was seeing more targets, he was getting more air yards. So by the time week 4 rolls around, he's actually getting a pretty good workload, and so I was starting to look to grab him. And then when I do grab him, now he's basically he's the number 2 wide receiver. He's the other outside receiver. He's getting full snaps, full routes, and he's getting a good target share. So for me, he's a kind of checks all the boxes for a good stash who I can use come like flex time if like I need him for buys or injuries. He's a guy who's probably going to project out 11, maybe 11 and a half fantasy points, and in a good matchup, maybe he's going to do better than that.
Talking to Bill Wanke, a owner of both FFPC Main Event and Football Guys Players Championship top 10 teams heading into Week 9 here. And Bill, we talked about your philosophy on drafting and managing season-long fantasy football teams here. One of the things that you had centered on your teams this year, a lot of Russell Wilson, a lot of Tyler Lockett stacks. And I'm curious what you saw in the preseason, in drafting season, while you tried to get as many of those stacks on your teams as possible.
Yeah, good question. So two big things. The one was to your question about the Russ and Tyler stacks. So I concluded based on all the stuff that I found out there that, yes, indeed, correlation was important and you need to correlate. So I was stacking everywhere I went. So, so if I had Russ, I either had DK or I had Tylock, right? If I had Dak, I had Cooper, I had CD, I had Gallup, right? So, that was kind of like a fundamental for me. So, if I had Russ, Tylock was probably going to be there unless I caught DK. So that was kind of number one. Number two for me was the roster construction quarterback-wise I wanted. Like, I wasn't going to get Mahomes and Lamar. They, great guys, great players, wish they were on my teams, but they were going like in the second and third. And the opportunity cost of the wide receivers you could grab in the second or third was just too high relative to the quarterbacks you could get in the seventh. So for me, my target quarterbacks were Dak, Russ, Kyler, and Watson. So those were the guys I was looking to get, and I was kind of pre-stacking those wide receivers in rounds 2 through 6, and then I was grabbing one of those guys in the seventh. So that was kind of basically my MO. And for whatever reason, the community at large, preferred Kyler and Watson typically over Russ. And so I got Russ a lot more than I got these other guys. But for me, I was happy to get him, and especially at the end of the season, I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm not a narrative guy, right? But Russ, the way he was being drafted, and Tyler, the way they were being drafted, was basically off of last year's performance. So if Pete Carroll stayed Neanderthal and was continuing to run the ball for 3 quarters, those were the projections you were running off of. So that would have been fine. They were at value. The whole Russ Cook thing was to me just like a bit until Russ tweeted it. Once Russ tweeted it, he's not the kind of guy who's going to go off the reservation and try to go social media his coach, right? That's not Russ. So when Russ started tweeting it, I was thinking, yeah, this isn't something he's trying to instigate. This is something they've decided. So then I was then I was grabbing literally my standard draft come the Labor Day weekend was Tyler in the 5th, Fuller in the 6th, and then Russ or Watson, whoever came to me in the 7th. That was going to be my Labor Day draft. That pretty much everyone I got took that form.
Those are all players that everybody's targeting. Everybody would like to have. You went about it in a wonderful way, and you kept hitting them. So were there any other players outside of the stack that maybe even that had double-digit draft positions that you made sure that you targeted every draft, that you could see this deviation from the standard and that you wanted to add those guys to your roster?
Yeah, so so most of my draft constructions were either 0 RB or anchor RB. So most of them were that way. So the guys that I was looking for running backs in rounds 8 through 12. So that was where I was kind of loading up on running backs. So the guys that I loaded up on were Chase Edmonds, Antonio Gibson, Zach Moss, and you guys remember in the early part of the draft season, those guys were going in the 10th to 12th. So I was loading up on those guys. I was picking up Boston Scott. You could get Latavius. So all those guys were guys I was loading up on. And in varying degrees, they've either paid off pretty well or planning to pay off pretty well going forward. So I had a ton of those guys. The other thing I had was I didn't have many complete fades, but I did have just total fades on a few guys. And one was Leonard Fournette. And then, because I was fading Leonard Fournette and because Raquel Armstead was out, my parting gift to myself usually was Divine Ozigbo. So I was getting Divine Ozigbo thinking that he was the guy that was going to be the back that they were looking at. And then, of course, come the last week of the season, we come to find out, like, no, it's James Robinson. So I switched up and I started grabbing James Robinson. And then for teams that drafted before that news, the first week of the wire, I went out and just smashed to go get James Robinson.
Talking with Bill Wanke, owner of top 10 teams of both the FPC and the FFPC main event. So I want to bring this to your attention, as Bill, I'm sure you already know this, but since Sterling Shepard has come back, basically after a month on IR, he got, in his first game back, 8 targets for 59 yards. Last week, 10 targets for 74 yards. In comparison, Darius Slayton on the same team, 3 targets for 23 yards and 9 targets, and he turns it into 56 yards. Has Daniel Jones chosen Sterling Shepard as his number one receiver for the Giants? And as a second part to that, how significant is that as far as high-stakes fantasy football teams go? Because sometimes you could be the number one target on your team, you're still not that relevant. How relevant is Sterling Shepard when we get down to setting our lineups in these high-stakes leagues?
Yeah, so, good question about the utilization of those two guys. I think the utilization doesn't say there's like a choice that, like, he's going to be hitting Shepard. To me, it's more like it's a 1A, 1B thing. And it's going to be, in any particular game, it's going to be either Shepard's going to catch or Slayton's going to catch. And, you're not going to know, like, at least I'm not going to know, right, because I'm not a football guy. I'm not going to know which it is a priori. But I think what you're going to find is, the routes that Shepard run are going to be higher efficiency runs, so he's going to be more consistent. But Slayton is just going to absolutely, smash a couple weeks. And, if you can deal with the volatility, for me, in our format, like where you get to the tournament, I'd rather have Slayton. But I don't. I have Shepard. So I'm kind of hoping, I'm hoping Shepard pans out. But if there was trading and somebody said, hey, do you want to swap them up? I would swap in a heartbeat.
Everyone that we've talked to are swapping their rosters for players that are going on the waiver wire. And guys that are new to the league, that's been the hurdle that they've had to overcome is getting comfortable and getting familiar with how they should act in that waiver wire. Now, that's the bidding and the mathematics behind that. I'll be fascinating to know how you extend your mathematical skills to that. And do you have any interesting stories about how you came up with either the perfect number to acquire the player with the best bargain, or did your math fail you like it does all of us from time to time, and you overpay for a player, significantly overpay for a player, and wonder why everyone else didn't see what you see?
Yeah, so Farrell, that's great, because that was like last year's agony, right? Every waiver wire decision just seemed to be a botch to me, and like that was kind of like category 2 of the things I took away from last year. And for me, though, the reality was when I went out to go see, was there any good information out there? The reality was there was not. There were a couple of like things I took away, but I think most people are struggling. Even guys who are good at analytics, like, you can watch some of the live streams of guys on waiver night, and they're botching it too. So, and these are guys who are good, good football guys, good analytics guys, but they're botching the waiver wire too. So for me, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the guys that I want, and I'm coming up with an expectation of like what they're worth to me. And it's fundamentally like a measure of expected points added to my roster. And then I can value that. And then so I'll know what it's worth to me. And then I can kind of go out to see if I can pay less for it. And I'll go out to look at historical comps about what the pricing might be for guys who fit that profile. As we are in this point in the league, you can go look at your own league now and see what guys have left, what they need, et cetera, et cetera. So you can try to figure out the price there. But like maybe one really good story here was like on week 1 when I went to go get James Robinson, right? I ended up like pricing him differently across all my teams. So for my 0 RB teams, like that's the key component that you got to fix in your build. Mm-hmm. So I went hard for him. Like modified RB teams where I was in pretty good shape, like I bid moderately. In a couple teams where I was really strong, I just put in a token bid in case everybody was asleep. So on my main event team that we're talking about, I bid I got James Robinson for like 227, right? And the next highest bid was 67. I felt fine with that because that was a good bid for me. That was good value for me. On my other team, the football guys team, I bid 127 and got him. And then on another football guys team, I bid $13 and got him. And I feel equally good about all three. Exactly, yeah. I feel equally good about all three, though, because they were valued right for me. And then, of course,
in Kentucky, we would call that a trifecta, brother. You know,
but I missed on some. But Farrell, to your point, though, Farrell, there were some that I didn't get, right? There were some where I got outbid. But I was okay with that, too, because I bid what I thought was a good value from my roster. And it made sense to me. So if I got them, I got them. If I didn't, I didn't.
And I think that's good advice. Maybe not necessarily at this point in the season, but for sure at the start of the onset of the season. Just because you're drafting all these teams, just because you are drafting them, doesn't mean they're all created equal. They all have their strengths, they all have their weaknesses, and you have to craft your waiver wire budget around that, which I think you did very, very well there, Bill. No question, as far as at least the James Robinson aspect goes. We do have time for one email. I know Farrell has one more question for you, but I do have an email here that came in from Pat in Chicago. He says, having a tough time figuring things out in my football guys league this week. Do I flex out TJ Hawkinson over Deontay Johnson? Congrats on your success this season. That is from Pat in Chicago. Pat, thank you so much for the email. We certainly appreciate it. So there's a couple of moving pieces here in this. TJ Hawkinson is in Minnesota as a 5-point underdog, but maybe with not Matthew Stafford throwing to him. Could be Chase Daniel. We'll see how these COVID tests go over the next couple of days in regards to Hawkinson. And then Deontay Johnson, who's had flashes of brilliance this year, but he's also had flashes of taking a back seat to not only Juju Smith-Schuster, but Chase Claypool as well. The Steelers go into Dallas this week as a 14.5-point favorite. Would you be starting Hawkinson over Deontay Johnson this week with all those aspects to consider there, Bill?
So this is going to really disappoint the listener. So here's what I would do. I would go to my places where I get my projections. And so while you were talking, I did that. They project the same. So you are basically flipping a coin. And so when I have to flip a coin, then the thing I'm going to look at is, what do I need for this week? Am I looking more for floor or am I looking more for upside? And, that might. And when push comes to shove and none of that answers, go with the higher total. So the higher side total that you have, gives you a little bit more touchdown equity. If there's likely to be a little bit of upside, I'll always side with that. But I'm going to go to the projections. And I have no reason to believe that the ones I just looked at, for those two players, won't be reasonable, right? Sometimes projections can suck because, last night's game, nobody knew who was getting the touches in the San Francisco backfield. People were just literally wild-ass guessing. But these projections for, Deontay Johnson, they're fine. The thing with Hawkinson is you got to question whether Stafford's playing on Sunday or not, right? So you do have that issue. So I might be leaning more towards, okay, I'm looking. Deontay Johnson is projecting around 12.5. That's probably legit. The Hawkinson one, I don't know. So yeah, I guess in this case I'd side with Deontay Johnson.
A question,
Farrell, one last. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, the question that I always love to ask. I'm sorry, Wanke, if I knocked out your last question, but this is always the hardest question. We had a guy on. Oh goodness, I can't remember his name. I wish I'd written it down. But he did an excellent job of picking the bust of the week. Would be Rams quarterback Goff, who did go to Miami, did face a cover zero, and acted like he had never seen it before. Now I'm going to ask you, and it will be. I wonder how you'll get to your answer. So here comes the questions quickly. I would need a bust for this week, a week 9 bust. He can be an excellent player. He's just going to bust this week. And then I need a sleeper, and he can be a kind of sleeper that everybody knows about, but he's the kind of guy that you would never maybe think of playing that you should play this week. Bust and sleeper for Week 9 from Bill.
All right, so Farrell, like you knew I wasn't going to give you just like a simple answer for this, right? So to me, when you look at the bust and sleeper thing, it has to do with relative to expectations and what you're looking at, right? So, if you're thinking about a flex option, I'd be looking and saying, okay, in most of my teams, my flexes are actually really strong because where I have to cobble together things is at RB. So mostly my flexes are really good. So I never really have that problem that often. But in this case, a couple I do. And, so guys we were talking about before, like Mooney, he's projecting like 10.5. So he's projecting a little bit better than in my models than he shows up on the FFPC site models. And I believe it. And I believe that he's going to project better than that. And partly I'm projecting better than that because the game's going to pace up. Like that game should have more plays in it than typical. And when you look at the prop total for Foles, his completion total prop is like 24.5. So, generally the Vegas boys are like, they've got better models than everybody else, or at least most things they do, maybe not the props. But at 24.5, like there's going to be a lot of guys catching balls. That's a lot of PPR points going to float around. So if you're looking for a guy who you need to put up like 11 points, I think, Mooney's like a good one. Like that's a perfectly reasonable one for me. On the bus side, again, it's relative. Like for me, the guy who scares me most is Marvin Jones. And he scared me before the Stafford news. So he scared me before the Stafford news. And the reason is because the projections are showing him really hot. Like he's running between like 12.5 and 15. And a lot of that is because the projection guys had to move the share off of Galladay. And so they don't know what to do with it. And so the most logical thing to do is to move it to Marvin Jones. But the experience has been when Galladay's out, Jones doesn't see it because the defensive coordinators roll coverage to Jones. And so then, like, Jones isn't dealing with the second best set of coverage. He's dealing with the primary cover guys, and then it's a different issue. So, if you're rolling out Marvin Jones thinking you're getting like 14 or 15 points out of him, yeah, to me that's a fade because I think he's going to should be projecting more like 11.5 or 12.
A guy we're projecting maximum points for is Bill Wanke this week. Bill, who co-owns several teams and has a team in the Football Guys Players Championship and in the FFPC main event in the top 10 of each of those contests going into Week 9. That is an incredible feat, especially when you consider this is your second year playing. Bill, congratulations not only to you. I know you own some of these teams with your sons. You own some of these teams, or co-own some of these teams with your buddies. Truly a magnificent feat, and I expect you guys to keep going down that road based on such good analysis tonight. We always like to hear different viewpoints on this show, and I think we got a big one tonight, looking at things a different way for all of our teams. I certainly appreciate you coming on. I certainly wish you all the best of luck going forward, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. You never know. Maybe you'll end up cashing a couple of six-figure grand prizes this year, the way things are going for you, man.
That would be awesome. I'd love to be talking to you guys again. Hey, thanks again for having me on. I appreciate it.
Bill Wanke, ladies and gentlemen. You can follow him on Twitter at Bill Wanke, and you can follow his team on the FFPC main event and the Football Guys Players Championship leaderboards going forward at myffpc.com. Farrell, I don't know about you, but it's always refreshing to hear an analytical view, a viewpoint that doesn't necessarily take in the eye test into it, because I think you and I, we sort of blend these things together, the eye test, analytics, and for Bill, it's all analytics, and it seems to be working out for him so far.
Balky, we made a real error in production of this show, because this should be a two-part show. This should be, one and two, because it's just fascinating to see how Bill's mind works, and occasionally by accident, I do some of the same things, but it's interesting in who he brought up as his bust of the week, and mine is not as well thought out. I go back to I just go back to football instincts that make me think that that Marvin Jones is going to struggle this week. And, so I get to the same place, but I tell you what, I would much rather bank on the intellect behind his decisions than the gut feelings of mine.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Anytime we have guests on this show, I always check to their line of thinking before mine, and more often than not, it has led me to victory, not astray. Speaking of which, let's try to lead some listeners to victory here tonight. We got a few minutes left in the show. We'll try to get to maybe 2 or 3 of these emails, Farrell. The first one is from Jim in Houston. He writes, if Devontae Freeman and Matt Breida can't go this weekend, do Wayne Gallman or Jordan Howard make for acceptable flexes? So since Jim, by the way, thank you for the email, Jim. Since he has written this email, Devontae Freeman and Matt Breida have both been declared out this weekend. So I'm starting Wayne Gallman in the league. I feel okay about it. I don't have Jordan Howard in any leagues. Patrick Laird is another guy that I'd be interested in, especially in PPR leagues like the FFPC, like the KFFSC. I don't know how you feel about the Dolphins running back situation, but I feel okay about Wayne Gallman as a flex.
I feel okay about Wayne Gallman. Sean Ligon, who I have always done some great fantasy work with in the KFFSC, he's a big Gallman believer, and he should be. And I think Gallman deserves an opportunity with the Giants and in your fantasy lineup. I don't think at this point any Dolphin is startable. They're going to roll the quarterback out and get him to where he can see what he can do in space. This is a team that's going to win on defense and their own type of offense. I just don't know what that offense is. The FFPC is the beauty of the dual flex. That means you can flex once and then flex again. Go flex a little bit and try to find you something better than Howard.
Yeah, I don't like Jordan Howard. I mean, I don't own Laird anywhere either, but I'd be much more likely to start Laird over Howard this week. You got to be super desperate. And I get it. There's a lot of, Miles Sanders is on a bye and Darrell Henderson is on a bye. There's a ton of guys on byes this week, but hopefully you can do better than that. All right, Terry in Magazine, Arkansas. Never been there before. Dear Marcus and Melvin, I don't know what's going on with Jonathan Taylor, but should I start Ronald Jones over him this week? I got to start getting these lineup decisions right. Appreciate you. Thank you for the email, Terry in Magazine, Arkansas. So, Farrell, I guess the first thing I want to ask you, what happened to Jonathan Taylor this week? Are we considering him maybe as a potential bust given what Jordan Wilkins and Naheem Hines were able to do? Or do you think that ankle injury that Frank Reich said Jonathan Taylor's dealing with, do you think that's legitimate and Taylor's going to right the ship here?
And there's no way to right the ship against the Ravens when you're hurting and sharing backfield snaps with Hines and Wilkins, and the difficulty that are going to be caused to the quarterback position. This is not a good game for Jonathan Taylor. Everything's trending downward, and now he's lining up against the Baltimore Ravens, a defense that is going to step up, a game that means a lot. The other players, Ronald Jones, Fournette, 51 snaps in the last game. Ronald Jones, 17. These are not good choices. Ronald Jones, perhaps with the goal line work. It's hard to get a lineup right with these two players. But I guess I am going to lean towards Ronald Jones. I don't think game script in either place is great for either of these running backs, but Jones will be the guy I'll go with here.
For what it's worth, to your point, the Buccaneers are at home and they are 4.5-point favorites, which usually favors the run game. Jonathan Taylor is a 1-point favorite, but that's against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Total of 48 on that game too. So we'll see how it plays. I think I'm leaning the same way as you, man. I think I'd play Jones over Taylor, but tempering my expectations in both scenarios. Let's fire away 2 more. John in Elko, Nevada. Hey guys, let's light this candle for the first time in a while. Antonio Brown in his first week back, or go with Sterling Shepard instead. That is John in Elko, Nevada. Thank you for the email, John. So we just talked about this a little bit. Sunday Night Football, it's the Bucs, it's the Saints in Tampa for Antonio Brown. It sounds like Chris Godwin is going to play if we are to believe Bruce Arians and what he said today. Sterling Shepard, we talked a little bit about with Bill Wanke. Sterling Shepard is at Washington in a game that they are 2.5-point underdogs, 42.5 on the total in that. Farrell, which way are you leaning here, Antonio Brown or Sterling Shepard?
This is easy. Sterling Shepard is going to score his 12 to 14 points. I'd be curious what Bill's model says to it, but I know the 12 or 14, 15 points, that's going to get you to be the fourth place qualifier, the fourth seed, that would be it, the fourth seed in the FFPC league. We call it divisions in Kentucky. Either way, you'll be the last guy to make the playoffs playing Sterling Shepard. Now, if you have Antonio Brown on your roster, you drafted him somewhere along the line. Somebody might have made a mistake if they did draft him and drop him. You picked him up. You've been waiting. This is your golden moment that you've been dreaming of. Don't let Sterling Shepard or any other middling fantasy production wide receiver come in and interrupt that dream like a shrill alarm clock. This is the moment, and it doesn't matter necessarily how many snaps. I may have downplayed what I thought made me sound real smart. I don't know after listening to Bill, but I went back to see what Brown and Brady did. This is my idea of smart mathematics, but I went back to see what they did when they played previously in New England, and Brown was on the field for 23 snaps, and Brady threw him the ball 8 times. Now there's a lot more targets that we have down here, but they're all pros, and at every position, including the tight end. This is just a fascinating game, but for all these reasons, Antonio Brown is your start. We can say New Orleans is 17th against the pass. What do they want to do? They want to bring pressure, and pressure demands that you get the ball away quicker. And Antonio Brown can deliver at all places on the field. What's going to blow fantasy players' minds is all these guys that made the mistake of dropping Scotty Miller. What's going to blow their minds is when shortly after the game starts and you see Scotty Miller and Antonio Brown on the field at the same time. And everybody's just going to go crazy over that. People want to talk about Lattimore and Jenkins, the first game of the season. A lot has happened since then. Lattimore, my old pal Charlie Casserly calls him a long strider. Long striders can cover ground quickly in the secondary. That leads to interceptions. But what they can't do is change directions quickly, and that's what Brown and Scotty Miller can achieve. It's great matchup football. Think about the matchups of who's going to play against who. And watch Marcus Williams, number 43 for the New Orleans Saints, who is listed as a safety, but he's more or less an escort for the other team's wide receivers. He runs along and shows them the way to the end zone. It's a fascinating aspect that this guy continues to be an NFL starting safety. I suppose it's because if they can deliver the pass rush, that he's good in getting to the ball or getting to the secondary underneath receiver that catches it. So that's a long-ass answer to your question, Balky. There's a lot of things going on there. Antonio Brown's return to football, I'm rooting for him. And if you've got him on your team, you should find a way to get him in the lineup.
Yeah, in-depth, really good stuff when it comes down to, all the individual working pieces of the New Orleans secondary, too. That is good stuff there, Farrell, and I certainly appreciate it. I'm leaning towards that, too, as well. The thing is, and this is the lazy analysis on it, people would say, well, if you're a big underdog, shoot for the moon and start Antonio Brown. If you feel like you got a good chance and you just need the points, then take Sterling Shepard. Well, I get that, but at the same time, if you're playing in the FFPC main event or the Football Guys Players Championship, aren't you almost always a huge underdog? You're always trying to pile up those points, and I think Antonio Brown could help you pile up the points there as well. He's been living with Tom Brady, working out with him for the last 3 weeks. I think there's a lot to be said for Antonio Brown in Week 9. Final email I want to get to.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Farrell.
No, I just had an off-the-cuff comment. I'm thinking about all the skills of all of Bill's skills that he brought to the show tonight. It just, yes, take a swinging forward. I wonder if Bill can play a little bit of Tom Petty's swinging. That's a great tune off the Echo album from 1999. Balky, look that one up. You go ahead and put Brown or any player like him in your lineup, then listen to that song, and you'll be glad you did.
You know what's funny about that is actually if you go to Bill's Facebook page, his personal Facebook page, he was sitting like row 3 or 4 to a Tom Petty concert in 2017, shortly before, when Petty died, 2018, 2019 or whatever it was. So one of his last few concerts, and I know Bill's a fan too. So it's weird that you bring up Tom Petty. I'm a big Tom Petty fan. I always have been a huge Tom Petty fan. As well, so I will definitely give that album a listen once again. I do want to get to one final email tonight before we sign off because I think it's an important one and it's a decision that's facing a lot of fantasy owners this week, especially in the FFPC. Comes from Tony in Omaha. Should I do the previously unthinkable and bench Lamar Jackson in favor of Justin Herbert this week? Lamar Jackson on the road in Indianapolis as a 1-point dog. Farrell, Justin Herbert is at home as a 1-point favorite against your Las Vegas Raiders. What would you do if you own both these guys? Would you still go with the chalk and start Lamar Jackson, or would you roll the dice and start Justin Herbert?
Always listen to your numbers and admit you were wrong. You shouldn't have drafted Lamar Jackson in the second round, but you were smart enough to somehow get your hands on Justin Herbert. So you now have got to flip the roster. You can't redraft it, but you can play it and make the right play. Justin Herbert, 4 ball games right around 300 yards out of his last 4. The Raiders are not going to do anything to stop that. The Raiders are going to do one thing to help Justin. They're actually going to put some points on the board. This kid's got Williams and Keenan Allen. People are talking about Hunter Henry not being as productive as he's been in past years. Hunter Henry's on the field a lot. He's doing a great job blocking. He's opening up pathways for several tight ends, including one that Dallas Renegade from the XFL, Balky. There you go, Donald Parman out of Stetson University.
Yeah.
This is a player that'll be drafted. This is a player that'll be drafted next year. This kid has so many tools. When he gets Austin Eckler back, all those guys that dropped Austin Eckler, and won't have him available for the final run over the last few weeks, they're going to be sad. Yes. Now, Lamar Jackson's going to have a good game. He's not going to have a great game. He's got the Colts. If this was another interdivisional game like Cleveland and the Bengals, it would be something different. But, Lamar's coming in this game with something to prove. It's going to be impressive. But, hey, he's missing a guy named Ronnie Stanley. He's missing Tyree Phillips. Who I think, as far as the rushing aspect, as you remember, Lamar shooting up the middle and running through when the pass rush is too much, he'll get that quick step. He was usually behind Tyree Phillips, and Tyree Phillips is gone. There's some guys that are going to play. This is a good team. They've got some good linemen. Some of their second linemen are better than some of the guys that are starting around the league. But at the end of the day, Justin Herbert in a sunshiny California throw-it-around ball game versus Lamar Jackson in a very, very gritty defensive battle. Justin Herbert's your guy.
As much as it pains me to say it, because I own Lamar Jackson in several leagues, and most of them dynasty leagues, but I think I would do the same thing. I think I'm going to go with Justin Herbert over Lamar Jackson this week. If it ends up being bad on me, it ends up being bad on me, but I'm going to use the best possible information I have at my disposal, including the big brain of Farrell Elliott from KFFSC.com, my co-host on the show. Farrell, good stuff from you. Certainly appreciate you tuning in and hanging out with me tonight, talking a little fantasy football. And enjoy week 9, man. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, Balky. Thank you, Bill.
Absolutely. Farrell Elliott, ladies and gentlemen. You follow him on Twitter at @JFarrellElliott. You follow the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship on Twitter at KFFSC. And that is going to do it for our show tonight. I want to thank so many people that helped make this possible tonight, including Bill Wanke, who's got the top 10 teams in both the Football Guys Players Championship and the FFPC main event. Tonight's guest, I want to thank Farrell Elliott, the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and, of course, each and every one of you for listening. Thank you so much. I want to remind you, Stephen Rannigan on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, rotoviz.com/podcast, or anywhere where you get your podcast. It was a fun one this week. I always say that, but this one really was a fun one with Steve Rannigan, too. So check that out. We will be back next week, 10-9 Central, coming up with Farrell and, of course, another High Stakes Fantasy owner that will join us on the show. Enjoy the rest of Week 9. The Niners and Packers got us off to a great start. Weekend, of course, starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and heard around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
As a reminder, everybody, if you love the dulcet tones of the music that we are featuring on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the outro that you just heard from the band Frederick the Younger, fredericktheyounger.com, or wherever you get your music is where you can get more of those tracks, as well as quiethollers.com. The Quiet Hollers providing the intro music. Farrell manages both those bands. I have seen both of them live. They are fantastic. I hope your Week 9 turns out as fantastic for you as the music did turn out for us. And great guest tonight, Bill Wanke. That was awesome. Good luck in your weekend matchups this week, and I hope the ball bounces your way. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening.